it by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
And the fans want one. Score! On the board! Paul Kariya!
Anyways, so I was thinking about it, and that's how you should make apple pie.
With nipples?
All right, that's
All
enough.
right. Hey, everybody.
No more shit.
We are back with the Forever Mighty podcast, an emergency pod of sorts, because the Ducks shocked the world and signed the biggest, second biggest free agent left on the market in John Klingberg. He signs a 1-year, $7 million deal with the Anaheim Ducks. And you called this, technically. You can take credit for it, as much as I hate it. With your backwards way. What did you say? Because he switched to Newport Sports, and you said because Newport is
he switched to Newport,
California.
Newport is in Orange County. So obviously that meant he was coming to the Ducks.
Obviously.
But what's funny is like obviously that was just me, like just wake up sheeple shit. But like the thing that's actually funny is when he fired his agent, it actually did move things kind of in Anaheim's favor, because that meant that the situation, at least you can kind of assume, right, that the situation in like the free agent landscape or what had kind of eroded to the point that maybe just taking a high cap 1-year deal with a team like Anaheim is the best bet, right? Because he can get the most money from them. He's going to get, I think, probably the biggest role of anybody, and he'll put himself in a position to get traded at the deadline potentially, and then do this whole song and dance over next summer after having hopefully had a really good year. So it's I don't know, man. It's weird. Like it really, like I was not. I don't know. I don't know how surprised anybody else was, but like this really like caught me completely off guard. Where were you?
Yeah, like we kind of joked about it on the last pod, which was a couple days ago, or before the Scott Wheeler interview. We went back and forth over a couple things, and I think we also talked about it on our free agency preview show, or at least the comments from Verbeek, where he was like, okay, yeah, the veterans available, there are, he doesn't believe that those guys are good enough to eat the amount of minutes of the defenseman that they want to do that. So, we got into what that means and whatever, and the only guy that fits that mold is John Klingberg that's left, and we didn't think that the Ducks would be able to get him, and he's probably going to get, ask for a term that is above what they would be willing to do. The money is what it is. The Ducks have the money to make it work on a 1 or 2 year deal, but it was always the term that was going to be the issue. I was surprised for sure. It makes so much sense now, and clearly it's such a smart move, I think, from Pat Verbeek when you look at the fact that this guy wasn't going to get the term he wanted. He wanted a Seth Jones type deal. The offer just wasn't out there. I like the move from Verbeek to be like, listen, we'll give you $7 million, which is above the market value. It's more than you're going to get anywhere else, but you're going to take 1 year. It's great for us because it's 1 year. If it doesn't work out, ship him off at the deadline, get some more assets. And for him, 1 year, prove that you can do it. Next year, you can get that contract. You're not stuck here for 2 years, so then you're a little bit older and it's tougher to get that deal. You can go out there and you can get that, try and get that long-term deal next year. I think it's great. I think it's a smart move for both the player and the team. And I was, just as shocked as you were to see that come across our timeline out of nowhere. No hints of it, no links at all.
No.
Like that. I mean, I don't know how quickly this materialized. Obviously, he just switched his agent, so it could have been, fairly quickly.
A standing offer.
But the Ducks have been pretty good at keeping things tight-lipped all deadline. We heard nothing really on Strome, nothing on Vetrano, nothing now on Klingberg either. So, I was surprised, but I love it. It's balls to the wall on defense. Not a lot of guys that can actually prove and they can play defense well, but it just makes next year so much more fun. And I personally love it for the effect it could have on Jamie Drysdale, not just to learn from a player like John Klingberg, but now he doesn't have to be that top pairing guy with Cam Fowler, right? Like there is a guy above him that they're going to give those minutes to, and he can pull back a little bit, which I think he'll benefit from. Focus on the defensive side of the game, take a year off from having to try and be that guy, which we saw with Cam Fowler early on in his career, where they just said, "Listen, you got to go out and beat this guy right away." And but yeah, man, I was surprised.
Yeah, it was interesting, right? Because I think, it's kind of funny because it comes back to something that we had talked about at the beginning of the, even before free agency actually opened up, where we were saying something that, we thought Anaheim should do is basically what this is, which is call everybody that's got a big name and be like, look, in the event that you can't get the deal that you want, this is how much we're willing to give you for 1 year, similar to like we said with Taylor Hall. And there was, I think Detroit has done it with like one or two guys over the years, where they bring a guy in and then they see where they're at the deadline. And, it makes a lot of sense. Like, I think
I remember you saying something about that. I think you might have mentioned Klingberg specifically, but I know you said it about Kadri. We're like, well, listen, just
Klingberg and Kadri were the two for me that I felt like a 1 or 2 year deal at a high cap hit was better than a long-term deal just from a Ducks perspective, even if it didn't necessarily make the most sense for them. And I think, to the point where it took this long for Klingberg to do that kind of highlights that it isn't maybe his preferred move, obviously, right? Like you said, he was looking for a Seth Jones type deal with that kind of term and high cap hit. Now, unfortunately for him, Seth Jones got that contract at 24, 25. Yeah. And he's going to be 30 in like a week. But for Anaheim, this is great. And, I had talked about it the other day from the Forever Mighty account on Twitter that like I had concerns about bringing him in on like a 3 or 4 year deal just because like what it meant for the lineup, and the right side is now all offensive guys. And, what is the point of having Kevin Shattenkirk if you're going to take him off the power play? And I think all of that is somewhat still true, but I think that the two things that have kind of changed my mind, I guess, a little bit is after, even before this, someone, I don't remember who it was, but someone had made the point, like, it's not the impact that John Klingberg can have to the offense and especially the special teams is significant enough that it shouldn't actually matter whether or not it removes Shattenkirk's thing, like his role in the special teams. And then the other thing was it's a 1 year deal. Yeah. So like they're both on the same page, and it seems just as likely they're both gone as they're both here at the end of the year, And I think, I do still think there's something to be said of how do we feel about the Benoit Shattenkirk third pairing without having a Manson Fowler, Manson Lindholm ahead of it. Klingberg's at least got some good size. He's like 6'3", 200 pounds. Like he's got a little bit of size to him. So I don't want to necessarily assume he's going to get pushed around too much in his end. But like his defensive numbers aren't great. He is, like you said, an all offense guy. Same as Jamie Drysdale, same as Kevin Shattenkirk. I think at this point it's safe to assume that the top pair is probably Fowler and Klingberg, like you said. I think that's pretty good. I mean, if they get trapped in their own end, it's going to be a disaster. Just because, neither of those guys really have the reputation for getting guys out of their own, get guys out of the crease and stuff like that. But by that same token, if they can trap the other team in the end, that's a pretty dynamic pairing and creative pairing. And depending on who the forward groups are, there's a chance for them to just kind of have a 20, 30-second shift that's a baby power play.
Yeah, but like the thing, too, is it was always going to be a mess defensively for the Ducks this year with who they had, with Drysdale, with Shattenkirk, with Fowler at the back end. Like, it was always going to be tough to really make that work for them and have that defensive prowess at the back end. It just wasn't going to happen. But I think what this does for you is they are a scary run and gun team now, especially if you get out there with Zegras' line. If Fowler and Klingberg are together, you've got them. Both of them have proven that they can be excellent kind of guys who can exit the zone cleanly, get the puck up the ice. And you add Zegras into that equation, he was one of the best controlled entry forwards in the NHL last year. Like it's a pretty deadly combo if you think of that you can kind of get up the ice that quickly and make things happen. Details, Lewis just put in the chat here. Elliot Friedman retweeted it from Puckpedia. The full details of John Klingberg's contract is it's a full no trade clause through January 1st, 2023, which is interesting. But I think that's probably from the team side, you would imagine, or maybe both, but a little bit of protection.
I think that's probably from him. Is that what?
Can't move me sooner.
You could
right?
argue that it's both, but it's just like, just give me a couple of months to get my feet under us. This is going to be new for everybody, and I think if you're John Klingberg, that's helpful because, like I said, like it's going to take everybody a second to get their feet under him, and it's also going to take him a second to kind of adjust to whatever the style that's coming is. Like, I don't know what to expect, but DB said R.I.P. John Gibson, and I think that's pretty close to right. Like, maybe the hope is that they just generate enough offense that it takes some of the pressure off of Gibby as far as, one goal's the end of the game. Yeah. So I don't know, but it'll be interesting. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that that's mutually beneficial, but I think probably is in there for Klingberg.
I don't know if this is just on my end, but I'm looking at the stream. Oh, there we go. Okay, your face was frozen for a second there until I said something, and it was great. You were stuck on a wonderful face. I hope that was not on my end, and it's on the video version now. But yeah, dude, I completely agree. I love this this move. I think that no trade and that works for both teams in a sense. Is that the Ducks do get him for a little bit. He gets to make sure he can get his feet under him. Whether it was, I think it benefits both sides. That 10-team no trade, I think, is smart on Klingberg's part, right? Is that he wants to make sure he also can go to a team that is in a good spot as well. So he can eliminate 10 teams off that, likely probably the 10 bottom teams in the league, or some teams that don't have a fit for him. And then, he can kind of pick and choose where he's going to go. I think whether he stays, the Ducks do, if he does really well, the Ducks are in a good position to say, hey, maybe, we can push for a playoff spot here. I know that's a stretch, but maybe look at bringing him back as an option. You've now got the first rights to kind of talk to him throughout the year and gauge that if that's a possibility. If not, you've probably going into the deadline with the number one defensive option for a lot of teams out there. Guys that were, teams that were very interested in him this offseason just weren't willing to put the term and the money that he was looking for. They will be back there looking for him again at the deadline, and any team looking for a guaranteed top 4 right shot defenseman who can either carry a power play 1 or power play 2, like they're going to be looking at him. That's why I love this deal, and it made sense when obviously you brought it up before with Kadri and Klingberg. Is if it doesn't work out and you're not in a good spot, you're still going to get something for this guy, right? Like you're still. And it's John Klingberg. Like, again, he has some name value there. You look at, I think it was Brian Bader who put this out. The D-man drafted from 2000 on and played 100-plus games in the NHL. Only Makar, Quinn Hughes, Adam Fox, Erik Karlsson, Roman Josi, and Letang have a higher points per game rate than Klingberg. 6 of them make an average. The 6 of them together make an average AAV of $8.9 million. So... There's some good company to be in over the last 2 decades of hockey. When you look at who are the players that are the best offensive defenseman in the league, he's 7th in points per game among those guys. So there is a lot of teams that are going to look at that and put some value in that.
Oh, definitely. I would wonder. Unless I missed it, the one name I didn't hear there was John Carlson. I would be curious to see what his points per game were at.
It's got to be close.
Just because
it's got to be close.
It's got to be pretty close, right? But no, I just think, I still think there are, some concerns about what does it mean for Kevin Shattenkirk as far as how much is Anaheim going to get at this? Like, is he going to be able to play at a level, even in a third pair role where he is having, a significant positive impact, at 5-on-5? But it doesn't, it gives them options, right? Like we were talking about that last time. Like the one consistent theme to what Pat Verbeek has done is about creating opportunities, not about getting rid of things. Even like we said, the decisions to move on from guys has created options as opposed to locking that guy down and eliminating kind of the team's flexibility moving forward. I think it's great. It's hilarious to me. The highest paid player on the team now. It's funny that the highest paid player on the team is a defenseman, and at the same time, it's also good to know that the Ducks are still the Ducks, and the highest paid player on the team next year will be over 30.
Yeah, we were just talking about that too, and
we're still going to make sure that we have it's something Pat Verbeek obviously says in his little, like the press release that you read, at least to me before the show, about, he brings in a veteran presence. He brings in some leadership. He's been through a lot of ups and a lot of downs in his time in Dallas. That team's been kind of up and down over that whole run. He was there for the 2 runs to Cup final, right?
Yeah.
He's been there for teams that have finished, in the lottery and missed the playoffs completely and stuff like that. So he'll be an interesting perspective. He'll have a very interesting perspective that he'll bring to the team, along with Ryan Strome. And I think in a lot of ways they're kind of similar. I think John Klingberg, relative to position, is probably a better player. But there's not a lot here to be upset about. With the more information comes out, the more encouraging everything about this move is.
Yeah, and I think the fun thing is, like, the Ducks have not had dynamic defensemen in a very long time, really, since Scotty and Pronger, right? For Pronger and Scotty Needham are dynamic for different reasons in a sense, right? But a guy that is that exciting to watch from the back end. We saw flashes of it obviously now with Drysdale, and Cam can bring that out every now and then. But we've had a lot of the steady guys over the years, right? The confident two-way guys who can shut guys down. It'll be a lot of fun, I think, just to watch.
Hugo's close.
Yeah, I think so.
He obviously wasn't at that level, but he did for a time. He was at least pretty solid and productive. So
yeah, it would just be fun, I think, to watch these guys just go out there. It's going to be painful a lot of nights to watch them in their own end, and there's not really anybody. If you're going to say that Fowler and Vakanainen are kind of your 2 top defensemen out there, that's a tough place to be if you're looking to compete. But again, I don't think this move means the Ducks are going to compete. It's going to mean they're going to be better, 100%. But I don't think it's necessarily a move strictly on trying to push for the playoffs. It's just a smart move to make. It's one that you have the cap space to do it. It's 1 year, and then you can flip them for assets later. And we've heard Verbeek mention that before. They'll explore those types of deals, and maybe we didn't think it'd be free agency, but trades to bring guys in that are flippable assets that you can move later. Well, now you've done that through free agency, and you've also added a guy who's going to make your team better, at least offensively. This is still a team that struggled on the power play in the second half of the year, a team who's offensively hasn't really gotten things going from the blue line in the past. Adding Strome to that power play and Klingberg now, both presumably to power play 1, they were significant impacts on their team's power plays last year and over the last 3 seasons. Strome was on power play 1, very good Rangers power play. Again, we talked about before how much of that is his impact versus who he's playing with, but he still had a spot on that top unit and did well. And now Klingberg as well. So you think, okay, Klingberg, Strome, Zegras, right? You start adding to that top unit. That should, in theory, we've said this over the years, in theory the Ducks power play should be good, and it hasn't. But you're starting to add those pieces, Terry, Zegras, Klingberg, Strome, whoever else you kind of want to throw out there as that 5th guy on that unit. You've got the makings of a really, really good power play 1 unit that should be able to get things done. So I mean, in that sense of the dynamism that Klingberg is going to bring to the back end, and just the excitement to watch him there, it catapults this team from having a really suspect blue line outside of Cam Fowler to, all right, this is starting to take some shape. You've got a legitimate top pairing now with Fowler and Klingberg, and you've got a really young, exciting player in Jamie Drysdale in the second pairing, and some good projects in Vakanainen and Mahura and Benoit and Ulevi, who they just signed, right? And then a good veteran in Shattenkirk. So
I'm still not sure Mahura's on this team at the start of the season.
Yeah, he might not. I mean, right now, I think there's 5 guys who have locked it down. I think Vakanainen's going to be there. Obviously, Klingberg, Fowler, Drysdale, Shattenkirk, and then it's Mahura, Benoit, Ulevi, Zellweger, Mintyukov. Those are guys who could all fight for that last spot, depending on how they do. Now, I think Mintyukov goes back, but who knows, right?
Yeah, no, I think more than likely Mintyukov and Zellweger, we can say, are going to be spending the year in juniors, but at the same time, I think if I had to guess of there being a surprise, I think those 2 would be the most likely to surprise in a meaningful way, I guess. Yeah, especially with the other 2, I guess you would pick would be Thrun and Lakem, but they're both going back to college, so it's not even.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. I think the 2 things that I've kind of been thinking about since I saw this is, one is they were doing for the free agency wrap up for Puck Soup. Lambert and McIntyre were talking, and they were saying how Ottawa was a team that was set up to lose games 4-3 as far as the kind of offensive firepower that they brought in by adding Giroux and adding DeBrincat and stuff like that. And I think Anaheim is in a similar situation in so much as like the moves that they have made should improve the offense. It should improve the power play, but none of it makes them, I guess, a more competitive team night in and night out because the defense is still largely suspect. So I think they're in a position similarly where they were going into last season, but maybe you're a little bit more optimistic. And we saw this bear out for the beginning of the season, which is, shut up. You don't care, DB. That's not, whatever.
Yeah,
Sorry, I just saw that
Lakem instead of Lacombe. They're chat's grilling you for that one. So
that's fine. From Jason Lecombe. But like, I think for me, we saw it at the beginning of this last season where it was we need good goaltending and a power play.
Yeah.
Well, the goaltending is the goaltending. We can have that argument closer to the season as far as what are we expecting from John Gibson? Who is he at this point? Is he 3 years, the last 3 years? Is he 3 years before that? Is he somewhere in the middle? Is this a Corey Schneider? He's burned into the ground just on bad teams kind of thing. But at the very least, there is more promise with the power play this year than there was last year, based simply on offensive ability. I think, bringing in Klingberg and Strome and Vetrano gives you the opportunity to have three meaningful pieces to spread over two power play units.
Yeah.
And that can hopefully help, raise the ceiling a little bit, but even then that's not necessarily right. But they can kind of have a baby Rangers season, right? Where somebody pops for a bunch of goals. A lot of their offense is entirely on the power play, and the goalie plays strong enough to keep them in more games than not, and they win a bunch of games. I don't think we're expecting Gibson to be Shesterkin next year. I don't think anybody is expecting, I don't know, would it be Adam Henrique would be Chris Kreider and just randomly put 50 goals up? I don't think anybody's expecting that. But I think if you said this team finished closer to 85, 90 points and missed a wild card spot by 5 to 10 points, that seems at this point more likely than finishing in the bottom 5 of the league.
Yeah.
Because we talked about this and it was like, well, who are you going to add to this team that's going to make them blah, blah, blah? And my thing was like, there's no defense. Well, there's still not a ton of defense, but the offense has improved enough that I think now you can safely say with the growth that you're hoping comes from the kids and the talent that they've added through the 3 free agent signings, they have a puncher's chance in most games now.
Yeah.
Right? There's not a ton of games where you're going to be like, oh, they're just completely out of it from the beginning.
Yeah, and there seems to be a clear way they want to play based off the acquisitions. And this might all be coincidence, but I would like to say it's not. But when you look at the underlying numbers for a lot of these guys and the advanced analytics, when you look at their skill sets, like Strome, Vetrano, Klingberg are all very efficient transition players. And Zegras proved to be one of the better in the league last year. Same with Troy Terry. There seems to be an approach here that they are just gonna go for it at all times.
Yeah,
listen,
exactly.
it could work. There are going to be situations where they're going to be caught up in their own end, and Klingberg, again, we've talked about his defensive efficiencies here and being able to kind of guard against entries and carry in. His entry targets per 60 aren't great. Carry percentage against isn't great. Chances against percentages, they're bottom tier of the league. But everything else, when you look at his controlled entries, his controlled exits, his own entries per 60, his shot assists, everything, they're up there. Vetrano, again, when we looked at his analytics, when we talked about him, that's a skill set that he possesses, and you add that to the mix that the Ducks have, and all of a sudden there's a clear kind of style they want to at least attempt to try next year and see how it works with these guys. And they've added players who kind of fit that mold. And for us, before the offseason started, we were talking about how can the Ducks be better next year? We're looking at this team. There's no way they're going to be better. They've lost Lindholm. They've lost Raquel. They've lost Manson. And I feel like they've done a pretty good job, right? Like, you haven't fully replaced those types of players, and the defense is still arguably worse than it was before when you had Lindholm and Manson. But, adding John Klingberg goes a long way of just making that blue line have a lot more stability to it. Ryan Strome is a very good addition to the top six. I'd argue he's better than Rickard Rakell, or it's at least close, right? Along the same par, I would say Strome's consistency has been a bit higher than Vetrano's been one of the better middle six forwards in terms of consistency that we've had in a while. There's still another forward that Verbeek wants to add. It was supposed to be Nino Niederreiter, but Roman Josi dumped that one for us. I mean, you imagine this team with Nino Niederreiter next year, and they're looking pretty exciting if they had him. And I don't know who they're going to go out and add now. We've talked about the options in free agency, but whether you get that through a trade, somebody like Beauvillier or Connor Garland or Martin Netchash or whatever, if you want to go big and swing for somebody, there's a chance, right, that this team looks pretty fun next year. It's going to be tough, and again, it's going to hinge on a lot of guys coming back and doing what they did last year. Is Troy Terry going to be able to be the same type of player? I would imagine he probably is, just looking at what he did last year. It didn't look like a lot of luck. We've seen lucky seasons from players before. Troy Terry looked like a superstar last year in every sense of the word, right? Like, he was controlling play and setting things up for himself. He wasn't a passenger on a line and had a good year. Like, he was getting it done himself. So I would say he can come back and still be a 30-goal scorer, 60, 70-point guy. Trevor Zegras, again, we've talked about, can he come back and do the same thing? He looks like he should be able to do that. And then you get into, what Scott Wheeler said. What's the type of season that Mason McTavish is going to have? He expects that. Right. He doesn't think it's out of the realm of possibility that McTavish could come in next year and be like a 20-20, 25-goal, 20-assist guy next year if all things go right for him. Okay, well, now you've replaced Sonny Milano's production. You've added a few more goals to that, and you brought in a player like that. Adam Henrique, again, Jakob Silfverberg comes in. Max Jones comes into the lineup. What do you get from him? Does Isaac Lindstrom take another step forward? Do Perreault and Tracy get in a few more games and really launch off?
Hell, all you need, you almost just need Lindstrom to not take a step back. Even ignoring production, you kind of just need the because I think it's safe to say that, like, his defense dramatically improved over the course of the year. And, I think his underlying numbers bear that out, that, like, he was improving as the season went on, despite it feeling like the team as a whole was getting worse. Like, it just, he was just getting experience. He was getting better. If he doesn't take a step back, I think that's a huge thing, right? I don't even necessarily know that he needs to take another step forward so much as just not regress. And if he doesn't, that's a really big spot for Anaheim to be in. Exactly like you were saying, like, the most risky move of the group is probably Klingberg, and it's a one-year move, so there's almost no risk anyways. Yep. Plus, if there's some kind of, at this point, not to rehash it, but I guess at this point you could almost say the riskiest move Verbeek has made is keeping Eakins, because, what could a different coach do with this lineup? Now, right. We have had this conversation 1,000 different times in 1,000 different ways. There's things to like about Eakins that I think make him a good fit for right now, but there is something to be said of, like, they just added 3 pretty solid players. Is it maybe more of someone like a McClellan that you should be looking for, as far as a guy who's going to come in and instill a system and create a structure for the team to kind of grow within? And I don't know, right? That's kind of, I think, also similar to, like, what Sheldon Keefe was. Yeah. He was a guy that was going to, kind of come in and install a system and allow these kids to grow within it and improve. And I think, they've gotten better over years and yada, yada, yada. It's just, it's a lot of potential reward for very little risk. And I'm going to be very curious to see what Dallas Eakins does with this group next year, because I think he has been given an opportunity, as far as Pat Verbeek, explicitly saying, like, it was a weird year last year, and I don't know that it's fair to judge Eakins on what was just a really weird year. Like, it was just a weird year, and I'm not going to hold it against him necessarily. I think he's earned the right to give this another little bit of a go. But at the same time, you can't say that Pat Verbeek hasn't put him in a position to succeed, or at least be more successful, right? Like, this roster is clearly better last year. Like, the thing that you lost, no, let me not say it that way. I think this roster has an opportunity to be more successful than the one last year.
Yep.
I think there are still significant holes. I still think ultimately losing two very strong defensive defensemen in Lindholm and Manson is going to be an issue, but I think you'll get more out of Ryan Strome over 82 games than you got out of Ryan Getzlaf, right? Just because age. I think Frank Vetrano is going to come in more with something to prove than Raquel, who was just kind of in a weird spot where it was just kind of always waiting to get sent out. Klingberg is an improvement for, even just chance generation from the back end on this team. So there's going to be an opportunity here for Aikens to squeeze a little bit more juice out of this, I think, than he was in a position to do last year. And there's no reason for them not to fire him. It's a 1-year extension, that kicks in. It's a team option. And I said it before, and I think it's probably more so true now, is like, I don't know that he's the coach by the time we get to Valentine's Day.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. At least, not re-signed at the end of the season. But I agree with you. I think what they've done, I think Strome replaces Rickard Rakell with a bit more of a consistent offensive threat than what Raquel brought. I really do like Rickard Rakell, and I love
I think that's more of Vetrano though, because
I was going to say Vetrano is more consistent and has a better track record than say Milano, who we lost.
That's fair. Okay, if you want to put those two in that way.
I think the Strome Getzlaf comparison does make sense as well, right? So.
So much as it's a depth playmaker, veteran center thing, right? We don't want to get out ahead of ourselves completely and sound like we're saying Ryan Strome is the next Getzlaf. But as far as coming in and being a meaningful member of an offensive unit, Ryan Strome is going to come in and be able to help lift the bottom a little bit on the amount of offense this team can generate.
Yeah, and I think when you look at that forward group, there's more confidence in other guys who had bad years stepping up than there is guys who had good years stepping down, right? I think we're confident that Zegras and Terry are going to be able to continue. Adam Henrique has been kind of the picture of consistency over the last couple of years, other than that little stint that got him waived. Oh, he has, and even came back from that, obviously, and put up a great year. Strome and Vetrano have shown over the last 3 seasons that they can put up a consistent output. You kind of know what you can expect from them. And again, like I said, with Zegras and Terry, you kind of know what you should be getting from them based off the way they played. So then it's, okay, Maxime Comtois, you really can't take a step back, right, than what he did last year.
No,
so arguably, if he's the same, then okay, but he should be better next year, and he should get some better opportunities. So there's a guy who could take a massive step forward, you think, from getting back to that 40 to 50-point range that he was in when he led the Ducks to scoring 2 seasons ago. Max Jones, what is he right now? We have no idea. A healthy Max Jones who can start right from the beginning of the season to get some chances. That could be a guy who could surprise and all of a sudden get 15 goals and put up 30 points or so. So there's an offensive boost from him. And we talked Mason McTavish again. And what does he come in and do? And does he make a big impact right off the bat? And the Ducks are still in the market for another forward to go and add to that. So I think, the forward group 100% with another addition is going to be better than it was last year, and at least be a bit more consistent and have a bit of a better plan in place for how the way they want to play. The only question mark again then becomes on the defensive side of things, in replacing the defensive aspect of Josh Manson and that physicality and Hampus Lindholm and his ability to shut down opposing players. So you haven't done that. I don't think they will do that, but Klingberg is a massive step in that direction to at least adding another capable defender to that blue line. And John Gibson is going to be a valuable asset for this team. So it makes it a lot more exciting for next season than I think we thought it would be. If you had told me before the offseason that the Ducks were going to add, Ryan Strome and John Klingberg in free agency, I would have laughed at you and said there's no way, that's not possible. They're going to do the bare minimum and add some bad contracts to get over the cap floor. But I'll give Pat Verbeek the credit he deserves right now, man. He has surprised me this offseason, made a lot of smart, shrewd decisions, and the Ducks are at the very least going to be fun next year. And as DB Larry puts in the chat, like the worst case scenario here is the team sucks and you're in the mix for Connor Bedard next year, right? Like, and you move Klingberg at the deadline, you move Shattenkirk at the deadline, you get some more assets, and you just continue the plan you had from the beginning, right? You've given yourself a good opportunity to be better, but if it doesn't pan out, that plan is still in place to continue the rebuild. You don't have to really start from scratch with anything.
Yeah. So real quick, do you have the cap friendly page up in front of you right
Yep.
now? Close it. Or how much were you seriously looking at?
I just had it open.
All right. Do you know how many players have trade protection left on this board?
I believe Silverberg does. And maybe Henrique.
Okay.
So I would,
Anybody else?
I don't think Gibson does. I can't remember him having it. I would say 3 to 4 guys have it, and that's it.
6.
Does Stroman have it or no?
Nope.
Who am I missing? Oh, probably Cam, right?
Henrique, Klingberg, Cam, Shattenkirk, Silverberg, and Gibson.
Okay. It's not bad.
No, not at all.
And like you're not Silverberg, no matter what, I don't think is getting moved. Henrique, there's been interest, and I think it is possible to move even with that protection because it's not that bad, right? It's like a 10-team no trade, same as what Klingberg's would be. Fowler's is the only hard one, but you're not really looking to move that. He has a 4-team trade list. Like that's a guy who's going to likely stick around for a while. Shattenkirk's is a 12-team no trade, so it's possible to move him, and Gibson's is a 10-team no trade. So if you had to go down that road, so it's like. Yeah, you got some trade protection, but you don't have like what the Stars have, where they handed Ben and Seguin full no move clauses, and you're stuck in, having to waive basically to whatever option suits them at that point. So
it's just such a disaster.
If the only tough one is Cam with a 4-team trade list, but he's at 6.5 for 4 years, like that's fine. I mean, you
I think at this point you can say that one of Cam and Gibson are the worst contracts on the team, and I think, because of the term, I guess you could say Silverberg's, but he's only got 2 years left, and you can put him on LTIR or whatever. At this point, and so I think at that point, if those are your 2 worst contracts, I think you're fine with it. The ceiling on what both of them can be is high enough to be worth it, and they both have a they both have a relationship with the fan base, right? They're 2 players that mean a lot to this fan base, have been part of the contending team since they were kids and things like that. So, those are the 2 guys that are on your bad contracts. I think you're in a perfectly fine spot. There's a lot worse ways to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams out there who have some bad deals that they've really backed
This
themselves
team was
in the
one
corner.
of them very recently.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like that's the thing about it. And, so I just think the thing that I keep coming back to for me is just everything with Pat Verbeek is just about creating options and opportunities moving forward and about not closing yourself off to anything. Yeah. They've still got tons of cap space. They've got movable assets. They've got players who are going to be interesting at the deadline, players who could be interesting in hockey trades before that. Gaucher is signed, Minchikov is signed, depending on how they look at camp and about where their timeline is. I don't know that you can't think that maybe Mahura and I don't know, somebody else probably are gone. Like, by the end of this year, I don't think that would be surprising by any stretch. I think you could say Lundestrom could be on the way out. Comtois could be on the way out. Again, we've talked about it, and we very much don't want it to happen. But I think Max Jones remains a fascinating piece for a contending team.
Yeah, 2 years left. Next year.
2 years left, a low cap hit, tons to prove. He's still really young. He plays with, with an energy and an edge that a lot of teams crave. Like, there's a lot there. I just think this team has a lot of options moving forward, and it's really nice to see. Again, like we said when we were before, it's just a series of moves that make sense, and it's nice. It's just everything makes sense. There's nothing that has been done so far that to me has prevented this team from improving over time.
Yep.
So
no, I completely agree, and that's the refreshing thing to see about this is like, the Strome deal was like the longest and maybe borderline. It's not bad, but it's not great. But it's 5x5. It's movable if you had to get out of it, and there's absolutely no trade protection on Strome's deal whatsoever. So you can move that anywhere. If there was a team that was interested, you could use it as a cap dump if you really ever had to get out of it, and wouldn't have to pay too much to really get out of that full deal.
I mean, yeah, I also think you don't like. I think we talked about this before, and it's just one of those things. Like, you also don't have to dump it. Like, $5 million. The cap is expected to jump in 24. Even if that deal, turns a little sour in the 4th and 5th year. Henrique is probably gone by then. Silfverberg is gone by then. Like the contracts that would make it hard to deal with now are already gone.
Yeah.
So the team's going to be in a different point of view.
The only guys still going to be on the books at that point are Fowler, Zegras, Drysdale, and Terry when they sign their extensions. Those are the only guys that are officially going to be on the books. I don't see Comtois signing a 5-year extension. I don't see Lindstrom after
maybe
2
Gibson.
Years. Yeah, maybe.
And Fowler, right?
Yeah, I guess Gibson actually still would be, because he still has 5 years left. So Gibson, Fowler, and then Zegras, Terry,
the 3 kids,
and Drysdale, because they'll sign their extensions beforehand. So if that's the position you're in, and like that turns out to be the only kind of contract that you have, then you're fine with that. It's only $5 million, and you've got maybe 2 bad years of it, because I think you're going to get at least 2 to 3 good years out of Ryan Strome. He's only 29, so you get a good kind of 30, 31, 32-year-old season out of him, and then we'll see where he is at that point and whether he starts to kind of turn down at 33, 34. But then you are where you are with Silfverberg right now, right? 2 years left on a deal that's more than he should be making, but it's manageable.
Yeah, it's.
And we lose the Perry buyout next year too. So.
Yeah, I mean, I just, if you're stuck with Vetrano in year 3 and Strome in years 4 and 5, like I just don't think it's hampering anything. I just don't think there's any reason to think that is going to prevent Anaheim from being competitive. Like you said, they're very movable, but I also think they're just kind of, okay, you're a third line now. Like, that's $5 million for a third line center. If the cap is closer to, $87-89 million, like that's not a big deal, right? I mean, there's expected to be a not insignificant jump in the 24 summer. And I think it is, very easy to say that those 2 guys, those deals are easy to eat. So I just think there's a lot to be excited about. I'm rambling and repeating myself, and I'm sorry, but it's a lot. It's just nice. It's just very comforting that everything makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we got 2 other smaller signings. You mentioned one briefly. Nathan Gauthier signed his entry-level contract to join Pavel Mintyukov. Now, I'll start this off with prefacing this is normal for CHL players to sign their entry-level contract, especially first-round picks, because there is no restriction. Like college players, the reason Thornton and Lacombe haven't signed is because you can't be a professional and play in the NCAA, so they can't sign until they want to basically leave the NCAA. Overseas players, you see it sometimes, but usually you only see it signed when they want to come over from Europe. Sometimes you see it a little bit sooner. But with the CHL players, it happens all the time. So Gauthier doesn't mean he'll play next year, doesn't mean Mintyukov play next year. All it does is it leaves the door open that they could. I think Gauthier has a better chance than Mintyukov does. I think they both need another year of development in the interior or in the CHL. But I know there's been some people, especially I've seen on Twitter, that are giving Gauthier a chance, like a shout to maybe nail down a third line role with the Ducks next year, just depending on how he does in camp, because he definitely has the size to do it now. I think he's 6'3", nearing 200 pounds already, if not over that.
I mean, that's something Scott said, right? He said Gauthier could walk into the locker room and he would not be one of the smaller guys right off the bat.
Yeah.
Like, he would physically not look out of place.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I think that's a little different than, how it's felt before with Terry being a skinny kid and Zegras being a skinny kid and Drysdale being a skinny kid and a lot of these guys just being real beanpole type players. Even Shea Theodore when he came in real early on, but he was just a skinny kid. Yeah. And, have guys like Mintyukov's already got some good meat on him. He's got good size. He's 6'1", I think right around 200. Yeah. Gauthier's the same. I think Gauthier might even be closer to 210. And he's 6'3", I think is what you said. Like, physically it does seem like there's a chance these kids could step in and maybe make the team a little bit. I
at least get a trial, right? We saw Lindstrom in his first year drafted as a late first-round pick get 9 games. We saw McTavish get 9 games last year. Of all the guys, that the Ducks have up front of prospects or the forward prospects, he could be a guy I see. Like I think it's easy for the Ducks to say Perreault and Tracy started this in the AHL because they can. I think Gauthier gets a chance there, depending on how he does at rookie camp and at training camp and in preseason, that he could get a shout, right? Just a chance to plug in there, depending on who the Ducks add up front and if there's a lot of room for him, but maybe you play him. If Silfverberg's not ready, there's a roster spot open there, and you give him a third-line role and see how he does. And maybe it works out. Maybe he becomes a checker, or maybe at the very least it just is those 9 games to give him a taste, and then you send him back down to junior. Because I think for the times that we talk about, McTavish and Zellweger, and it doesn't make sense to send those guys back to junior because they have nothing left to prove, because they've just dominated to a level that they can go back, and what are they going to just basically do that the same? There's only as high of a ceiling you can really go in a league like that where you're basically the best players are ready. Gauthier, I think it could almost be the same thing, just at a different level, where he's not going to gain anything physically, and if at junior his offensive ceiling is that he's going to be just above a point per game player, then is there much left for him to prove at that level, right? He was on a team, and he's going to go back to a team that is fairly deep, and that he's not going to be the number one option. He might not even be given that opportunity next year, so he's going to go back and slot into the same role and do a lot of the same things that he did in Quebec last year. Not a ton of opportunity necessarily to take on some more offensive responsibility and bump those numbers up a bit. So if he shows out well and looks good in his 9-game stint in Anaheim and there's a spot for him, I think because of the type of game he plays, he could stick around. Of all the guys that they have that could stick around after getting a 9-game stint, I think he's the most likely, just because of the profile of player that he is right now. I think the Ducks are kind of
Gauthier?
Yeah, Gauthier. Because I think with Minchukov, there's more to prove. Defensively, he wasn't great at the junior level, so he's got to go and prove that he can do that. I would argue that, Gauthier can prove that he can be better offensively in junior, but is he going to be given that opportunity? So then I put him in the same boat as McTavish. Does he have anything to prove at the junior level to go back and do the same thing?
All right, real quick. We're going to do 2 things right now. One is you got to something that I was curious about, which is, of all the young players, who has, like, which of the players who have an outside shot to make it play the whole season next year with Anaheim? And the second thing is, we're going to talk about how to say this kid's name. You were saying Gauthier?
I think it's Gauthier, because usually
there's no
Gauthier.
I.
Isn't
it GACU?
Because usually
GAUCHER.
Yeah,
Gauthier?
GAUCHER. Usually Gauthier is like Freddie Gauthier from the Leafs, where it's THIER, and that's like Gauthier, like Gauthier.
Sure.
I gotta find the French pronunciation of this, because
we gotta figure this out.
My French.
If anybody in the chat knows, please tell us.
My French doesn't extend beyond elementary school, so.
I don't think your English did either. It's fine. And then, okay, so is it Gauthier for you then? Is it Nate the Great? Is that the one you think? Because for me, it's Zellweger.
Yeah, that's the other one. I think McTavish is the shoe-in, right? Like, he basically has a spot on the roster right now.
I think of everyone, he's the most likely at this point.
Yeah.
Of someone who didn't play, 60 games last year to be on the team. I think physically, I think the role that he can fill, the different kind of positions that he can play for the team. I think he is as close to on the team as it's possible.
Yeah.
And then the next tier down is Tracy, is Perreault, is some of those types of guys, and that's where you get into Hunter Drew, or maybe even if you want to say Olin Zellweger, and like.
I think Olin Zellweger has a better chance than Tracy and Perreault, and not because I think he's more NHL ready or significantly better than them, just because of the ease of putting them in the AHL to start the year, right? That it's just easy to place them there because they can go there.
That's a fair point.
Where I think, McTavish and Zellweger, it's junior or NHL. So they're either going to play a lot of games in the NHL or they're going to go back to junior. Those are their only 2 options. Right. Where Tracy and Perreault can play 20, 30 games with San Diego, see how they do, and then get a call up based on injuries, or if you end up sending McTavish back or whoever back, that you have, you know, an open roster spot at that point. So I think McTavish is as close to a lock as you can get. It'd take something, you know, something dramatic, I think, for him to not play to start the year. I don't see what he has to gain from at every level he dominated last year. There's really nothing to gain from sending him back. But yeah, I would put Zellweger right in that mix. The only reason I don't have Zellweger above Gauthier right now is because I do think there's only one roster spot available on that blue line with Klingberg signing. I think before Klingberg signing, I would have put Zellweger above Gauthier, just because it's now
So
Fowler.
1 in 6 or 1 in 7?
What? No,
When
if
you say
he's gonna
there's
play,
one spot.
yeah, 1 in 6. I don't think they keep him
Okay.
around to be the 7th guy, unless it is again a 9-game trial, like we've seen with some guys, where that 9-game trial is over 11 or 12 games, and you're kind of a healthy scratch for 1 or 2 of those games, then you get sent back down. Maybe there, but if we're talking about who could play the most games, he's not going to stick around all year and not play the majority of the games, right? Like, he's not going to be a healthy scratch, I think, for 15 or 20 games and stay at the NHL level. I just don't see how that benefits him. If you don't think he's ready to get that responsibility, then you send him back and bring him back next year where he has that AHL eligibility. And if he's not playing at the NHL level, you can send him back down to San Diego, and at least he's playing at that point. He needs to play. So I think skill level wise, Zellweger probably has the better shot, but it's just with that one roster spot available, because it's Klingberg and Fowler, Vakanainen and Drysdale, and then Shattenkirk. And Vakanainen seems like he's going to get that spot and play. Or if you want to replace Vakanainen, you could say Benoit.
Benoit. Yeah.
you could say
I
Benoit.
almost feel like Simon Benoit has a likelier shot at than Vakanainen, just because.
Yeah, one of those guys has a nailed down roster spot for next year, and I think if you want to say the amount of games they played in the Ducks uniform, then I could agree with you. Benoit probably has that over.
I also think Benoit provides, you know, a different element that this team just doesn't have. You know, like Vakanainen to me seems like Cam-ish, where he's going to be a puck-moving transitional guy, not necessarily stand out in one end or the other, but more about just making good decisions, using skating, using reach, and things like that. And, like, that's fine. But I just think there's nobody on that blue line right now that is going to cross-check somebody. Like, there just isn't, and that bothers me, because you're going to get people to stand in front of the net. You're going to get people who are going to go after Gibby. And, you know, John Klingberg and his offensive prowess doesn't do you any good in the box. Mm-hmm. So you need somebody else who can go out there and just kind of handle shit.
We've heard, and we've been a part of it, everybody joke about the all gas, no brakes approach from defense. I'm just thinking of, like, adding Zellweger to that mix. Like, just, like, fully,
oh my God,
fully committing to that. And, like, it's not that Zellweger's bad defensively. Scott Wheeler talked about how he actually is really good defensively, and a lot of that has to do with his skating. It's just that bombing up the ice approach, like adding that to Fowler, to Klingberg, to Drysdale, to Shattenkirk, and then Benoit is left on his own to kind of be the only guy who doesn't do that.
He just kind of becomes the responsible one.
Yeah, listen, like, in an ideal world for me, McTavish plays the majority of the season, or the whole season, right? Maybe a few games here or there he sits, back-to-backs or whatever, if you want to do that. And then Zellweger and Gauthier get 9-game trials, and we'll see how they do. Do they, you know, whether they grab it or not depends on how they play, and I think it should be based on that. If Zellweger shows that he can play after 9 games, then you keep him up. If Gauthier shows that he can stick around and be a part of this roster and is better than the guys that he's displacing from the roster, then you keep him up. So that would be ideal for me, of seeing those two guys get some 9-game stints, because I do believe Mintyukov should go back down over Zellweger. If there is that one spot we're talking about, I think it's Mintyukov who goes down. And then up front, you know, I again, like I said with Tracy and Perreault, it's easier to start them in San Diego. And of all the other forward prospects we have left, I would say, you know, Gauthier over Pastuov, right? Just in terms of being ready. I think Pastuov needs to go back and show that he can be that 90 to 100 point player at the OHL level. And you know, I don't think you know, Shigurl, no, you know, guys like that, they still need another year. They still need more development. So I would put Gauthier as that other guy. So I think we're really only talking then about 3 guys. It's McTavish, it's Zellweger, and it's Gauthier, as guys who could get an extended look out of camp and maybe a bit more than a 9-game stint, depending on how they do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how awesome would it be if it was like the one guy who stood out coming out of camp was like Leno or Warren?
Yeah.
Because
I don't know where they
like
play now though. They've
Noah
got a tough
Warren just
spot.
being ready, like
That would be
would
great.
be. My heart needs this. I need a big punchy boy, and that kid's a beast.
Yeah, I
So
know they want obviously him to work on the offensive side again, but like again, like if we're talking being NHL ready and having the size, like he definitely has that. He's 6'5", like
yeah, yeah.
220, so he's definitely physically ready to get at the NHL level. But yeah, like I think the only tough thing for him now is the Klingberg signing is now shored up the right side of defense for the top three, right? It's Klingberg, Drysdale, Shattenkirk. It just makes sense. So
Bye, Kevin.
yeah, so unless Shattenkirk's moved before the start of the season, we have to play him much
Zellweger
offside.
Warren, dude. Let's go. That's going to be the second pair. Zellweger Warren in, I don't know, 4 years. I'm
It'd be
hoping.
a lot of fun. It would be a lot of fun because I think Warren is a lot better skater than he gets credit for at 6'5".
Although I probably imagine they might put Leno,
Yeah, yeah,
Warren.
Thran, Lacombe on the
Yeah,
other side.
Warren's probably a third.
Mintyukov.
Yeah.
So the defense is looking good though.
Ooh, Minchikov, Drysdale. Then you go Zellweger and Leno.
You still have
and
Hallison
then,
too, right? I mean, we didn't even talk about him as
uh,
being another option to get some time. But again, I just feel like I think DB Lowry mentioned in here Hallison or Hunter Drew and Clay Dog just mentioned Hallison as guys who could play next year. They go in the same boat for me as Tracy and Perreault, as just being easier to start the year in San Diego because you have that option.
yeah.
Where you don't need to hand a 9-game trial to start the year because they can come up at any point after you make a decision on the guys who you do give a 9-game trial to, right? Like there is no 9-game trial for Hellison. There is no 9-game trial for Hunter Drew. They can come up and play, and there's no entry level contract slide because they are able to play at the AHL level. So I don't see them getting in the lineup to start the year just because of that. Just because
hmm
if you want to hand that to Zellweger and you want to hand that to Gauthier, then I think that takes precedence. And whether then, if they get sent back down to junior, okay, maybe at that point you bring that guy up and you give him a chance if he starts the season well. You've just got that flexibility. I think you need to take advantage of that. Is that if you really do want to get a look at Zellweger for 9 games, or if you really do want to get a look at Gauthier for 9 games, you take advantage of that, and then you get a look at some of these AHL guys as the season goes on, as injuries happen, and you need to bring guys up. So I just think it makes a bit more sense to do it that way. But, man, I would love, at the very least, to see Zellweger and McTavish stick around for the whole year and prove that they could play at the NHL level. I think that would be amazing. If you add Gauthier to the mix, or at least a 9-game trial for Gauthier, that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. You should be able to have a 9-game trial in like December.
Yeah, just come
Like,
up
you should
at any
be-
point.
Yeah, you should just be able to like have a 9-game stint. Like you can just like, I don't know, what would you make the rules? Like you have to play your 9 games in 14. You have to play 9 of 14, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't 4-10 off, 4-10 off, or like that kind of shit. But like, it would be cool to just be able to, like if Pastujov, right, was like when he blew up early next year, and they were just like, fuck it, bring him up. Let's just see what he's got. It's not like we're not
Yeah.
in need of offensive talent on the wings. Bring him up, see what he's got, and probably goes back down, and you do what he does. But I just think it'd be. I'm sure more than a few people have mentioned this. I just had never thought about it until right now. But I think
Yeah, neither did I. It'd be an interesting addition or kind of adjustment to the rule between the CHL and the NHL to just kind of have that happen at any point where you can move these guys into a 9-game trial. And even if it is December or January or whatever, maybe you have a cutoff point once you get closer to playoffs. Like maybe it is January or whatever, February, that they have to have this 9-game trial for.
Yeah, I feel like you would have to say, like, honestly, like January 1 or something is the cutoff, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't,
You can't be calling these guys up mid-season because it does affect the CHL teams.
Exactly. And especially that's a little bit before the CHL trade deadline and all that kind of stuff. Like the point of the agreement is to, play nice and make it easy.
Yeah, well,
you don't want to piss them
in
off.
3 months' time, their seasons could be over and they could come up and play AHL hockey because that, again, the rule, the agreement adjusts for that. So I think, having that kind of Jan 1 cutoff that it has to happen in 2022 this year, right? To get those 9 games in. I do like that. I think that does give you some flexibility. That, like you said, if a guy just starts off really hot and you just say, hey, like we want to give you a chance, or there's an injury here, and we don't like what we're seeing for some of these guys in the AHL. Okay, come up, show us what you got. I don't know if the CHL would ever agree to that, because I don't think they want to lose their guys after that point into the season, but it'd be provide some nice flexibility.
That's a great point.
Yeah, because right now, like,
it's like, what happens if you just keep him?
Yeah, like
no, you have to send him back.
You know that at the very least, like, it's gonna be 9 games that you're gonna miss. And I don't know how many that equates to at the CHL level and how many games they would miss, but they don't play during midweeks usually, so you're probably only missing 3 or 4 team games before you have to come back, and your team has to make a decision there. And then, if they keep you, at some point, like, you might get them back. Now, you do that during the middle of the season, it makes it a bit tougher, I think, on those teams to really get a look at what they have and figure out their roster. And if a team calls a guy up like December 10th, right, and you're just trying to make plans or make a push to be better before the deadline, and they take your best player and you lose a bunch of games, and now you're in seller mode, like, all of a sudden that's going to be... It's a lot different if you lose the first 4 games of the season versus losing 4 or 5 games in the middle of the season when you're kind of fighting for a position to figure out what kind of team you are.
Well, I'm glad we came up with and then deconstructed our idea. This is a great idea. We should do the... Oh, well, actually, no, these are all of the really legitimate reasons why it'll never happen. Okay, moving on. We got to talk Ole Levy, right? There's the last one. Ole Levy, and then there's 2 other things we got to cover.
Okay. We'll be quick on Ole Levy. 8 games last year with Detroit, won no points in 10 games with the Panthers. 1 assist in 3 games with the Checkers, so he's kind of all over the place. Only played 21 games of hockey last year. I don't know if he was injured or not. I haven't followed Ole Levy too much since his days with the London Knights, playing with Max Jones. I think most of us saw Max Jones a tweet after Ole Levy was signed that he was pretty excited about it. At one point, highly touted prospect, former 5th overall pick by the Vancouver Canucks. I'm always a fan of these deals, right? Just bringing these guys back that were drafted that high. There was a reason they were drafted that high at one point in their career. Some size there. He's 6'2", 182. He's only 24. Like, I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. And he'll get an opportunity to earn that 6th roster spot or be a 6-7 right off the bat. He'll be competing with Mahura and Benoit and Vakanainen for that spot. Basically takes over what Larson was doing last year. And again, like, with Larson, it was always he was a first-round pick that didn't kind of grow into that and fulfill those expectations. And now you just bring in another guy who is in that same mold and see what you can get out of him, right? You knew what you had in Larson internally, how he was going to fit in your organization. It just wasn't going to work out. So I like it. Whether he sticks around or not is, well, we'll see. But I like adding another unknown name to that mix as a potential, 6th man on the roster, right? Like we've kind of seen what we've seen from Mahura. We know what we're going to get from Benoit. So I like that kind of unknown aspect of Ole Levy jumping in here. And, maybe he pops off. Maybe he gels well with Drysdale. Maybe he gels well with Shattenkirk, and things start to pan out for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you put it the way you put it, it really clicked for me what it was doing, which is he comes in and he replaces Larson, and more than that, he replaces Larson and Gooley, right? Because Gooley went over to Sweden, Switzerland, one of the two.
Yeah.
And Larson, they just didn't qualify, and he walked, and he's wherever the hell he is now.
Ottawa. He's in Ottawa.
And they said they don't have any defense in that team.
I know.
So, I just think it provides them another guy who's probably going to spend most of the year in the AHL. He will probably come up 2-3 times throughout the year. If there's an injury or something, get a fill-in spot, see how he does. He's obviously going to have an opportunity coming out of camp to earn a depth roster spot, but I don't think there's necessarily any pressure on him. He's a guy got along with Max Jones. They played in London together, like you said. They were on the team that won a chip, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I should know this, but I'm trying to remember from Ole Levy's time there if he was still around when they won, because Jones won with Tkachuk when Tkachuk was there, so he was either there when they won or left right.
Yeah, because they were in the same draft.
Yeah, yeah. I think they were there together. I think the Knights won that season.
But, I mean, it just seems like there's a lot of little bits here about what he can provide, who he kind of gets along with, and things like that. That just, it's simple, it's exciting, and like you said, it's better than the Cody Curran thing, right? Which isn't a shot at Cody Curran. It's Cody Curran was 30. If you weren't going to bring him up, what was the point? Taking a guy like this, I think similar to kind of what we talked about with Elvin is for a little bit. It's a guy that he's young enough that he can still improve and develop into, an NHL regular. Like you said, the pedigree is obviously there. He was taken 5th overall at one point for a reason. You can obviously look at 1,000 different examples of guys who were drafted way too high and things like that. But I think Yoel Levy at least was recent enough that you can kind of think the thinking around him going that high was a little bit more modern or progressive than, necessarily someone like Goodbranson, right?
Yeah.
But it's minimal to no risk and a potential upside of, I don't know, he's a top 4 guy at the end of the season, right? Like, I mean,
the pathway is there, right? Like, Vaakanainen and Benoit, nobody's 100% holding down that spot. So, as a left-sided defenseman, outside of Fowler, you do have that chance, right, to jump in there. So yeah, I mean, I just think there's not a lot to be concerned with, and a lot to be optimistic about, right? I don't know that you want to say excited. I don't want to say that you say hopeful, but I think there is a reason for optimism, in so much as you're bringing in a defenseman with some pedigree into an organization that at least at one point had a solid track record of developing defensemen. Yeah.
So
I would love to look into this question sometime from DB Lowry, saying who was the best reclamation project recently, because we do talk about that a lot with guys who were drafted high and didn't pan out originally with the team, and then they come to a new team, and especially when they come to the Ducks, you're like, okay, like this guy had a high pedigree at once, maybe he can turn it around. I'd wonder if there's anybody that's ever been said about, and then they've actually turned it around, and I'm sure there has. I can't remember one off the top of my head of kind of guys.
Why can't I think of the dude from Montreal
Duran?
who isn't huh?
Duran? I know.
No, not Duran. The guy who was in the Max Domi trade to Arizona. Not Pacioretty, not Gallagher. It's Galchenyuk. There it is.
But even he never really got it right.
Mm-hmm.
So and Lopez in the chat said Milano was kind of like that. Yeah, last
absolutely,
year, for sure. I'm thinking, like, I'm trying to think of a guy who like figured it out and like was consistent beyond one season, and I can't. I'd have to look into it and find out if there's ever a guy. But I wonder if there is.
We're gonna have time to kill in a month, so
yeah, gotta look into that and see. Okay, what were the other two things you had that you wanted to get to?
So the first thing was obviously the most important update in Ducks news. The Adidas will no longer be the jersey manufacturers after their contract is up.
After next season, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
I believe it's this season and next season, and then they're done, the 2024 summer. So obviously that means we all have to bother Eric Stevens about if this means we'll finally go back to the old colors and the old logo. Who do you want to take over? Do you have any thoughts? Like, I just don't want it to be Reebok. I did not like necessarily the way it was under Reebok. I don't know if there is even enough of Bauer left for Nike to...
I think Bauer's. I don't even know if Bauer exists under Nike's umbrella anymore. I can't remember.
Lewis is champion or starter.
I saw that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, who does the NBA right now?
Nike.
And then, football's a tough one to compare to, but. And then I know Nike and Adidas always battle over. Soccer jerseys, so
they're kits, Edward. Don't be a fucking goon.
Yes, yeah, you are right. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing CCM come back in the mix now that they're not owned by either Reebok or Adidas. Like they're their own company since 2017. It'd be cool to kind of see them come back in and see what they could do on their own.
How funny would it be if like Puma came out of nowhere?
That would be interesting. I don't.
That would be so dope.
I don't know what they would do. Like it would be a really weird.
Like
somebody
Fila.
DBLI mentioned Under Armour.
No,
not a fan.
I'm not dealing with the Steph Curry company. I'm not doing it. I'm not dealing with this shit. Steph Curry and Jordan Spieth. I have no patience for those dorks.
Warrior too. Like I'm sure Nike is gonna be like if Nike gets in the mix, nobody's beating Nike's proposal. Like they'll just dump money into it, and like you can't beat it. Ultimately, for the NHL, it's gonna come down to money. It's not going to come down to who do they think is the best fit, who's going to make the best jerseys. It's going to come down to the best proposal, who's going to give them the most money. If Nike wants in, it's Nike. Now, if Nike doesn't want back in, it does open it up to an interesting, battle here where it's CCM, it's Warrior, it's Puma, it's Under Armour. Who's going to want to give up the most money? Because I think Under Armour out of all of them probably has the most money of the four of those I mentioned, but would they be willing to offer a certain amount for that? Do they, want to be the face of hockey? Because I don't think hockey's their major focus, is it?
It never really has been, but here's the thing that's interesting. Under Armour is based out of and run and owned by a dude from Maryland.
Okay.
It wouldn't necessarily be all that surprising to me if Under Armour did want to try to get into it and try to capitalize, just being from a part of the country where there is a bit more hockey, as far as that whole area up there, and like it's not that far from like New England and stuff, and I know that Washington has had a pretty big impact in that area on youth hockey and things like that, so it wouldn't necessarily be the most surprising, but we do have to say, as Khaled on Twitter said, the best option is Jordan. If we get Jordan brand hockey jerseys, that would be cool. It's never going to happen. We can't have nice things, but that would be the most fun in the world.
There's only a handful. Like I know PSG has Jordan brand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many other do.
Yeah.
But I would imagine like Charlotte in the NBA, they don't have Jordan. Do they have Jordan brand, or they have to be?
I think they have Jordan brand.
Or do they have to abide by whatever the NBA has?
Oh, well, that's probably it. But I think, who was I thinking of just now that has, like I know Jordan is just like there's golfers who have like Jordan branded gear.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, like ultimately it comes down to it's Nike, it's Under Armour, it's Reebok, it's Puma, it's Warrior, it's CCM. And then there's funny ones you could look at, like New Balance or something like that.
Fila, New Balance, Lululemon,
Kappa. Maybe. But yeah, it should be one of those big. Like I do think the most interesting one maybe is Puma, right? Maybe like they've always been weird like that, where they just kind of show up out of nowhere and they make a big deal like that. And I'd be interested to see what they could do with it, because historically, like Puma has done some really cool things with jerseys. Most of the time, it's been soccer. But they've
been Arsenal's kit for a while, right?
I think so. Yeah, they've
done some cool ones.
They were Dortmund for a bit, and they've kind of switched over. So they've done some cool stuff, and they always seem to think out of the box and try and do things differently. So I think that would be pretty cool to see what they could do. I think I saw somebody, like, I don't know if it's jokingly or not, mention Lululemon is one. But I think like at the end of the day, it has to be somebody who's designed jerseys in the past. Like, I don't think we're going to get somebody come out of the woodworks that has not done jerseys or not.
Anchor Blue.
Yeah, like even, like, I don't think, like, I mentioned New Balance and I mentioned, a few other brands that, like, they do equipment brands, but they haven't done jerseys, right? Or haven't done jerseys in a very long time, because I think Warrior did jerseys for, like, a year, and I can't imagine that they would want to jump back into that. So, like, I do think it's Nike, it's CCM, it's Under Armour, and it's Puma who would be kind of the top dogs offering it, and be interesting. But somebody also mentioned, like, Nike right now has the NFL, the MLB, and what was the other, and the NBA, right? Yeah, so they have all three of the big four, if you want to still include the NHL in the big four sports. if you want to complete the collection and go back and get the NHL back, right? So
The final jersey
Infinity
Infinity
Stone,
Stone. Yeah.
So I would
So-
imagine, like, if I had to put save money down, it's probably Nike, but I would welcome a new one in just to kind of see what they could do, right?
I agree.
I'm welcoming the change from Adidas because I'm not a huge fan of what they've done. Now I do like the fits of their jerseys better than I've seen from some in the past, but just some of the approaches they've taken to like these reverse retros and stuff. In some aspects they've been good, and in a lot of others they haven't been. So
Yeah, I think I think for me some of the like more just standard home and away jerseys under Adidas have been kind of like the reverse retro misses. I'm kind of just fine with.
yeah.
Just because people miss, right? Like in every league, right? Different teams have different misses and all that stuff. So like the reverse retro stuff, I'm less critical of, but like some of it is just not good. Like some of the like home jerseys and away, like standard jerseys are just not good.
I feel like Adidas had too much hands-on with the design process, where they wanted to do some weird things they thought would work, and it wasn't always like thinking of what the fans would like in jerseys. So whoever comes in, I hope there is that, right, where it is a understanding of what the fans want. You're never going to make everybody happy, but there was too many cases where a lot of those jerseys were like people just wondering why the hell they made this or designed this, right? And I would hope there was a bit more of that. DB Lowry put the just worst nightmare scenario in my head of it being Fanatics taking over the full.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If it is Fanatics, every time all 5 fights that we're going to get in the NHL per year would have old school style rippage because that stuff is made out of like wax paper.
Yeah.
So we'd get some old ones.
I do agree the Adidas era was probably better than Reebok, but not quite the same level as CCM. I would agree with that. It's Reebok had some tough years, but yeah. So Adidas, like in general, did okay, but then there was some weird moments they tried to branch out and do some stuff, and it just didn't work.
The last thing that we have to talk about is you apparently tried to show your daughter the Harley Quinn TV show because you thought that was appropriate, and I just think you should defend yourself in front of the people. And that they should know that you're a monster.
I have no way to defend myself other than I thought maybe a DC, like the only DC kid shows I've shown her have been kid shows. They've been Teen Titans and like actual kid show. So she really likes Harley Quinn and the DC superheroes, and I was like, okay, I was looking for shows, and I was looking at it at like 7 a.m, so I was half awake, and I found the Harley Quinn show, and it was a cartoon. So in my head, and like obviously more lately, like there have been like shows like Invincible and like the Boys cartoon adaptation, which is basically just again the same as the show. Like there are those where they're a bit, but they're like, I figure, okay, that's like an Amazon Prime thing, right? Like Amazon Prime seems to have a ton of those shows. So I was like, okay, I'm safe. Like this is an HBO Max show, I think, or something like that. And it should be okay. And it looks pretty tame. And I just threw it on, didn't look at it was on a streaming website, didn't look at the rating, just popped it on the TV. And I was sitting, making her breakfast, and I heard a couple of F-bombs, and I was like, all right, like I didn't know if I heard it right. So I was like, okay, I walked out there, and yeah. I walked out to like a scene of her biting some guy's ear off, and I was like, "Oh man, I made a bad choice here. This didn't work out." But yeah, apparently it's like the same like type of show as like Invincible or something with that type of graphic that's behind it. So did not pan out, but I'll probably watch it though. You told me it was a good show.
It's so good, dude. I love it. It's such a great show. It's just so funny because everything you said is right. Like if you're not thinking about it, there's been a ton of like animated content for kids, and the comic book stuff is getting pushed.
Too. Like you're like, oh, this is a cartoon show, and then like all of a sudden,
all the way off the rails, bro. It's so
quickly,
good. It's so
quickly off the rails. I just cut it there. I was like, all right, that's fine. And she was like, yeah, that's fine. I don't want to watch this anyway, so it's not happening.
So that's all. I just wanted to make you answer to the people for that.
Yeah, thanks.
I mean, is it my fault? Probably, but that's not the point. We're not going to have that conversation.
No.
So.
But hey, we managed to turn one topic into an hour and 26 minutes like we normally do. Stretched it out a bit. But exciting,
there you go.
exciting day. John Klingberg is an Anaheim Duck. Didn't think we'd be saying that this offseason, and now maybe we're back again tomorrow as Nazem Kadri signs a $1 million deal and follows suit with that. So that I know that's what I saw a lot of that on Twitter today. I still fully believe that there is going to be some team out there who clears the cap space and is willing to pay Nazem Kadri big money. Calgary, the Islanders. I think those are two teams that are going to get it done. But if they don't, and if they can't, it might happen. Like, of all the teams that have all that cap space right now, where would you rather go if you're Nazem Kadri? Buffalo, Arizona, or Anaheim? I think after the Ducks signing Klingberg, I think you'd choose Anaheim, right? So it's a possibility.
There's just so many bad. Honestly, I almost wonder if you go to Buffalo just so you could punch Austin Matthews 6 times a season.
Yeah, you get to play in Toronto a bit more and burn them. But hey, man, like, I'm not going to put it out of the realm of possibility because I didn't think this would happen. So maybe sees this and says, hey, like, I'll take a big payday now. And I'm at the very least he's going to get a deal next year, even if it doesn't pan out for him. He can get moved at the deadline. He can go to a team. The Ducks can eat half of that salary. I think 1/12 is tough because even then moving him with 6 at the deadline is a lot. But if you do like a 1/10 or 1/11, it's not as bad. Move 5.5, you retain 50%, and God forbid you push for a playoffs with Kadri and Klingberg on this team, right? So
what a weird situation that would be.
What a way to make a statement as a GM and kind of pave your own path, signing two of the top free agents to 1-year deals.
God, that'd be so funny.
Just trying to go for it.
I would love it. Yeah. Just screw it.
At that point, though, if you're playing well at the deadline and you're in a spot, do you move them? Like then you get, like, you probably can because it still is found money, right? Like, you just signed these guys.
Well, I think it depends, right? Like, I think it depends on if you have any interest in keeping either of them long term.
Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, you didn't, and it was then you're in a playoff spot at the deadline.
Then I think at that point you have to trade them because you go to them and you'd be like, we can extend you with this, but like you're probably not comfortable with that, so we're going to move you, and you move them at the deadline to a team that's going to get a contender, and you maybe bring up somebody, right, like a Hellison or something like that to kind of help fill it out, and you see if you can either stay afloat long enough to make the playoffs and get swept in the first round by like Colorado, or if you fall far enough that you fall into the lottery and you make a little bit of luck. I think at that point it's probably mostly about just where the young players on the team are and how strong they're able to play, how much of how much of them being in the playoff race is Kadri and Klingberg having good seasons, and how much of it is all the kids taking a step together, right? That's where it becomes the question mark for me.
At the end of the day, it's not a bad situation to be in. You either keep them and you don't get anything for them, and you get a nice free playoff run, and then they go to free agency. And you know what? Like, you're not losing out on anything necessarily because you didn't trade anything or lose any assets to get them in the first place. Or you move them and you get assets and maybe you still make the playoffs depending on your position and the kids take steps forward, right? McTavish jumps into that 2C role or whatever. Perreault comes up, Hellison comes up, and you manage to kind of still get in the playoffs and do okay. And then the rebuild continues, and you continue with the assets you got. So it would be still a win-win scenario either way, right? To do that, and I think obviously you can compete better with Kadri and Klingberg, and it appeases the fan base a little bit. You go in, you go into the playoffs, get a little bit of a long playoff run, get a taste of it again, right back to the rebuild. But hey, we've refreshed you guys a little bit. We've made the playoffs. We've done well, and now we're right back into it. So
I'm glad we took ourselves out of the lottery in the 1 year with the generational talent. Nobody noticed that part. Bye.
Yeah. I don't.
What are you gonna do? It is what it is.
Yeah, Kadri would significantly surprise me. I can't see it happening, but hey, I mean, anything could happen right now. So.
I didn't see this before I woke up today. So.
All right. Well, that's gonna do it, guys. We have a few other plans for some interviews after the Scott Wheeler one with some people, so we're gonna schedule that up and And then from here on out, we're just going to try and do as many shows as we can. I don't know how much Ducks news we're going to get. This one just kind of worked out. But we do have some plans to kind of talk about the NHL as a whole and go into a lot of the stuff that we haven't been able to cover yet. Some of the big moves, like we've talked to Matthew Tkachuk from a Ducks perspective.
How does it affect Toronto, right?
Yeah, I know we want to get into that a little bit more and kind of really dive into what I don't know if what that means from some of the other teams' perspectives and really get into that. So we will definitely be back in planning for that. And what else do we have? I know we've been talking a bunch of different ideas. For some reason, it's escaping me right now.
Yeah, we want to do like league reviews, league previews. I don't know. My brain is turned off. It's Friday, man. I don't know. I can't. My brain doesn't work right now.
Yeah.
I know there's stuff we wanted to do. We have them somewhere in like DMs or notes or things like that. We'll find them.
But yeah,
a couple people we wanted to try to talk to, like you said, and if we can get those people, we think we're gonna have some interesting conversations and stuff. So just that kind of stuff really right now. And then as once we get to the part where it really wraps up, Kadri signs and all that, we'll probably do some kind of big picture league-wide review.
I love it. All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Off season still in full swing. But if you want to help us keep going throughout the summer, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. Search Forever Mighty. Leave us a rating, a review. It really helps it. We'll read it on the show. We really appreciate them. Love to kind of go through those. So if you haven't, please do that. We're also on Spotify, and they've introduced a new rating system too. So if you want to pop on there, give us a quick rating. If you're already listening to the show, if you're listening right now on Spotify, just give us a quick pause during one of the ad breaks and leave us a rating. We appreciate that there. All video versions of this show exist on YouTube. You can go to youtube.com/ForeverMightyPodcast. Make sure to subscribe. We also put out some morning shows when I have time, more so likely during the start of the season, called Ducks Morning Brew. So those will be back. You can go back and backdate some of those. They're still relevant, and check them out. Check out our website, forevermighty.com. Find everything in one place there, where to watch, where to listen to the show, how to support. You can go and look at our fancy bios and find out a bit more about me and Steven, Jason, Patrick, and where to find us on social media. Our Twitter is at ForeverMightyFM. Jason's is at Jason_Lamb. I forget what Pat's is now. He's changed it. I can't remember what it is. So I can't shit out Pat. Mine's at Eddy Van Jones. Steven's is at The Hockey Boomer. But yeah, thanks guys. Thanks again for everyone listening. Thanks to everyone who joined the stream. We've got new emotes, new sub badges for all of our subscribers. So if you want to, if you've got Amazon Prime and you're sitting there with an Amazon Prime subscription, you don't know what to do with it, Twitch offers a free subscription. You get one free subscription with your Amazon Prime subscription. So send it our way. You get some nice emotes. We added them in. We've got our Zegras in Nom one in our chat. We've got the turtle with Ryan Getzlaff. We got a Ryan Getzlaff with Lucky Charms. I don't know where I found that one. I just found that randomly on my computer. And we've got the Jason with the faded out Fowler RAPM chart in front of him. So they're a lot of fun. I mean, they're little extra things we add into the stream. But again, thanks again everybody for coming out, and we will see you soon.
Bye everybody.